Philemon chapter 1 verses 9 to 17. Receive him no longer as a slave but as a beloved brother. I, Paul, an old man, and now also a prisoner for Christ Jesus, urge you on behalf of my child Onesimus, whose father I have become in my imprisonment. I am sending him, that is, my own heart, back to you. I should have liked to retain him for myself, so that he might serve me on your behalf in my imprisonment for the gospel, but I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that the good you do might not be forced but voluntary. Perhaps this is why he was away from you for a while, that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave but more than a slave, a brother, beloved especially to me, but even more so to you, as a man and in the Lord. So if you regard me as a partner, welcome him as you would me. Paul spent much of his ministry in the Roman province of Asia known today as Turkey. He made a number of converts in Colossae, which was a city about 80 miles east of Ephesus. Philemon lived there with his family and was a wealthy slave owner. One of the slaves, Onesimus, whose name means useful, left Philemon and became a runaway slave who followed Paul to Rome and then converted to Christianity during Paul's imprisonment. Paul wrote a short note to Philemon in an effort to beg him to spare Onesimus from the runaway slave death penalty. This letter was written by Paul around 60 AD. A secondary purpose of this letter was to convince Philemon to do something different from what people in his culture expected him to do with the runaway slave. Sometimes church leaders must urge people to obey what the Bible teaches, not what is expected from the culture. Philemon finds himself trapped between secular, worldly, and biblical thought. Punishing Onesimus with death is a secular penalty created to strike fear into hearts of other slaves, but if followed, death would cause his usefulness to anyone to cease. Forgiveness is biblical, the death penalty is secular and demonstrates a total lack of forgiveness. The death penalty eliminates any chance of reform. It prevents the slave, or human tool, from being of service to anyone. Onesimus has become a fellow Christian and is now willing to return to you, seeking not only forgiveness but his acceptance of his return to his duties as a slave. Philemon's Christianity was demonstrated on a weekly basis as he hosted worship services in his own house or domestic church that, according to contemporary architectural patterns, would have been limited to 15 to 30 members. When Christianity became accepted in the Roman Empire and the number of congregants greatly expanded, there was naturally a need for a larger meeting place. The Christian place of worship found a home in Roman courtrooms, which is why many of the trappings of the Roman courtrooms have been retained and are incorporated into sanctuary areas. The candles at each end of the altar were used to read by the plaintiff and defense attorneys. There are 3 chairs close to the altar, 2 of equal size and 1 larger than the other to indicate the president, or leader, of the court's tribunal. That chair is now occupied by the principal celebrant of the Mass. When Onesimus left Philemon, he was like a broken tool, but after hearing Paul preach, he became the broken tool God repaired. Paul was asking for Philemon's mercy when dealing with Onesimus, just as God shows mercy to all of us sinners.